Hi there, it's a Common Magician. I want to try something with you. I don't know if you've ever used a time machine. I know that sounds kind of weird. It sounds unusual when you think about the implications of what a time machine is. But the truth of the matter is that we all have time machines, right? This, for example, is a time machine, a watch or a clock, something that keeps the time. And of course, we all use them. We use them all the time. It reminds me, though, to think about a time machine. It reminds me of the great H.G. Wells, who's really the inventor of the time machine, the science fiction time machine as we know it. He wrote that great novel called The Time Machine. I just want to try something with you here real quick. I've got my watch here, and we're going to use it for a little bit of an experiment. I think you'll enjoy this. Right now, the time, let me see here. Right now, the time is currently, it's just after 8:30 in the evening, right now. What I want to do is, I'm going to have you hold on to my time machine. So if you just hold that in your hand and cover it up. And I'd ask you a question. Is there a certain time of the day that is important to you? We all have certain times of the day. For me, it would be approximately 3:30, right? That's when work is done and I can come home and unwind. That's a very important time of the day for me. How about you? Do you have any? Someone might say maybe it's early in the morning, 6:30 when they wake up, or even earlier than that, or they might say it's a meal time, maybe sometime around 5 or 6 o'clock when they get to eat their favorite meal of the day. H.G. Wells is known for a very particular time, that great inventor of the time machine. He died on August 13th, 1946, just after 2 o'clock in the morning, very late at night, early in the morning, he passed away. About 10 after 2 a.m. I want you, holding that time machine in your hands, I want you to imagine the hands on the clock spinning furiously, moving backward in time to that very important moment in the history of time machines. And now it's done. Very slowly, I want you to turn it over and see what time it says. And if you take a look, you would see that the time now reads 10 after 2. So I just wanted to take a few moments to share some ideas that I had been thinking about recently, considering timepiece magic, watch magic, using a regular watch or a normal watch. A couple of years ago, I posted kind of some insights, a tutorial on a few ways that you can use a regular timepiece to do some mentalism sort of effects, just using a $5, regular drugstore type watch. And the reason why I did that is because at that time there seemed to be a number of watches hitting the Magic Effect marketplace that were just extremely expensive. And of course, for good reason, they do very complicated sorts of technological feats in order to create the effects that they're designed to create. So obviously that costs money. That's out, not accessible to many hobbyists, just in the price alone. But also, even if you had the money, many of these types of timepieces were limited run and not very well available. By the time they were available on the market, they're mostly sold out. The people that are close to the magic vendors that were selling them would, bought them all. So, there were those issues, and it just occurred to me that there's plenty of things you can do with a regular watch, especially a classic analog watch. So I made that tutorial. I didn't notice at the time, but another YouTube channel that I'm familiar with and was at that time, Totally Magic, and I think I'll link to him on here so you can see his channel, did a similar kind of tutorial talking about regular timepiece magic, and a completely different application of it. An application I really wasn't aware of until recently when I caught that video, because I didn't see it come out at the time. But he was looking at an old effect. He doesn't reference it, and I don't know where to look. So if you know where this comes from, please mention it in the comments section so we can share and credit properly. But it was an old effect using a watch such as this one that had no number indications. There's just hash marks for the hours and minutes, and then, of course, the regular hands on it. You have the short hand for the hour, long hand for the minute, and then a second hand moving around. And the idea there is that with a clock face like this, there is a lack of reference. If it's being held this way, which is proper, you can see that the little stem is on the right side here. This is the way a watch should be held. You can read the time. And if it is held, however, this way, it would appear to be a completely different time, upside down. But in the right circumstances, if the stem were covered or if it was presented in the right way, this might pass kind of quickly as the proper time on the watch. And if this is accepted as the proper time, the watch can be dealt with without being handled, put into a spectator's hand, and when they reevaluate it, when they take another look, the time will appear to have changed, even though it's merely showing the converse of where the hands were at from the other view. It's a very simple kind of concept. And if you're, of course, if you're familiar with magic principles and with the wrong kind of presentation, this might be obvious to you. But the argument goes that with good presentation, this can fly pretty well. And he was noting, the creator of this YouTube video, was noting that he was trying this on people that he knew. He had gotten back into this. It's a principle he learned years and years before, but he found a watch that was like this, didn't have any markings on it, didn't have a logo on it. This actually has a logo on it, but you can't see it. It's the same color as the face, so it's hidden in there very small. And he was doing this for family and friends, and they just weren't catching on. They thought it was amazing. So this plays pretty well. So anyway, this is a $13 watch I found on Amazon. What you want to do is search for minimalist watch. So you want one, again, that doesn't have a logo, that doesn't have numbers on it or Roman numerals, it just has hash marks, and it does not have the date. You want to make sure it doesn't have a location for the date, because otherwise that will impede or get in the way with the presentation. Now, just a couple of concepts just to try to better this idea as I'm paying this forward and passing it on a couple years later. Something that I had in mind was, what if I set this so that the time was inverted all the time, and I merely wore the watch upside down? So the way this was presented on Totally Magic was that you would pull the stem out and have the spectator change the time, and then you would look to see what time it was, and then you push the stem in and then put it back in their hand, and then you note that the time changed by inverting it. So they would turn it, and when you present what time they set it to, you turn the watch upside down and show them the incorrect inverted time. And I'll talk about that in a moment, because there's something you need to know about doing that. And then, without manipulating it, they would hold it in their hand without you touching it, and then upon re-examination, the time would have changed. A couple things I didn't like about that was, one, that the watch had to be manipulated once. You would set a time, and then even though the spectator does it, and then it would change after that. And I didn't want to have to do that. I want to take a watch that's unmanipulated. You literally take it off the wrist, and then it is the time that it is, and everyone knows what time it is in the day, and that's not off, on their internal clocks or on their own timepieces, on their phone or watch or whatever they have. And then they hold it in their hand, and then it changes to some other time. I wanted to be able to do that without having to pull that stem or appearing to manipulate it in any way. I want to show them the correct time that it is of the day. I want them to put it in their hand, and then I want to move on from there. So that's one thing I want to deal with, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, how we can do that. Another idea that I had was to give a little bit more motivation for the time that it ends up being. So on the original video, he merely just changes the time, or the spectator has the time change in their hand, but there's no motivation for it other than the narrative of time travel. And I thought, well, H.G. Wells, right, is a non-magician. Often with magic tricks and references to, times of death or dates or whatever, we use like Harry Houdini or, some kind of well-known magician. I thought, well, H.G. Wells wrote The Time Machine. He's kind of the godfather of the concept of the time machine because of that book. And I thought, well, he died I looked it up, he died in August 13th, 1946. I don't know what time. I don't think you can even find that. But I thought, really, you could make any time his time of death on that date. And it seems legit, right? So what we're doing is whatever time of day it is on my watch, the converse of that is going to be the time that I motivate in my story. So that's another concept I came up with. Another idea that I thought about was maybe I could force them to pick the time, because it's nice if the spectator randomly picks the time that you're going towards. And you could do some equivoque, but I thought, you know what, it's better to just avoid that. However, there might be the possibility that you could get lucky. So I came up with this little monologue, this little interaction. I asked them, what's an important time of day for you? What hour? Right? And I could get lucky. They might say the hour that I'm shooting for. And then I could say, that's interesting you would mention that hour, because that's a very important hour in the life of H.G. Wells in 1946, yada, yada, right? If I don't hit on that, I continue and I say, what time of day is a really bad time of day for you? Can you come up with an hour that is just the worst in your day, in your schedule? And I might get a hit on that. I can say, the worst time for H.G. Wells was this particular time. It was the time he died. So my idea here is to put in a couple of layers of multiple outs that might hit, and I can draw in an extra layer of magic by having the spectator's randomly chosen time coincide with the story and with the outcome. So I don't present that on the video. I'm just giving you what my dialogue looks like. But that's my idea. So I'm going to try this out with this watch. I'm not going to link to this. Again, some people might want to find this watch, but really, just look up minimalist watch. Minimalist is what you're looking for. A minimalist watch is a kind of watch that doesn't have all the bells and whistles on it. You can get a lot of minimalist watches at drugstores for very cheap. I went on Amazon. I went online to get this one because I wanted something that had water resistance. I do get my watches wet, so I wanted to have a nice one that would at least stand up to that. This was $13 for the watch, and then I bought a $20 silicone band that I replaced. It's got a nice quick release on it just to kind of upgrade the watch a little bit so I can wear it all the time. Now, so for me, I wanted to keep this always in inverted time so that I'm always ready to present. Now, there is a problem with that, is that a clock or a watch does not read perfectly inverted. There is a discrepancy. So one thing you want to be aware of if you do try this, see if I can get this so that there's not much of a glare and you can sort of see this. This watch is nice because it's got gold hashes on the 15-minute marks, and then it's just got some shiny black. So you can't really see the hashes that well, but up close and personal, they can see it well enough to create the effect. But not well enough so that you could take the watch off and quickly flash and say, the time right now is whatever. And they wouldn't notice much of the discrepancy because they can't see everything that well. They can see the hands and they can see the kind of 15-minute marks very clearly. But this discrepancy will fly by nicely. And I like that about this one, so I bought this one as opposed to a few other options that I found. Here's the issue. The hour will not read proper. You can see right now, it's worked out just for the tutorial. It now is just now going to be 9 o'clock. So it is 9 o'clock, and the way you have to read this is that if the watch is upside down, which it is, when the minute hand hits what would be 12 but is actually 6, the hour will only be in between. It'll be between hashes. It won't read exactly on because the watch isn't actually built to be read this way. This is upside down. So the way I look at it is the first half of the clock will be read ahead of the hash. And then the second half from the 6 up to the 12 in terms of minutes, so from 30 up to 59, will be read after the hash for the hour. So right now it's 9 o'clock, and this can be flashed even though the hash is gold, right? The watch could be removed. I actually wear it upside down, just like this. And since I know that as I look at it, and let's be honest, who really uses their watches anymore? Right? I really know my time and the date and everything from this handy little device that we all have in our pocket. So, because of that, I'm perfectly comfortable doing this. I just know that it reads funky, right, in this way, that I'm going to be reading from minute 1 through minute 30 on one side on the back side of the hour, and then it will cross over as it gets to 30, and then I'll be reading on the opposite side. So right now it is 9:02. And I would take the watch off from this position and without really noting that the stem is on the wrong side or anything. And then I would fold down what is really the bottom, but I would fold down the top. And then I would grab it in my hands like this and cover both sides with my fingers and then show the spectator. Right now it's just after 9 o'clock. And as I do this is my point of view because I'm looking at a shallow angle. I can read what the real time is. Okay, not what the real time is, but what the clock really is saying out of time. So as I'm showing it's just after 9 o'clock, I'm looking at it and seeing it's actually just after 2:30 for the watch. So now I get my reading and I know what I'm going for. So I just adjust about a minute or two ahead for the patter. And then I have them put it in the hand, I tell them the story, and I say, if they don't hit on the hour 2 on either, a good time of day or the bad time of day in my dialogue, I say, well, H.G. Wells, he passed away on August 13th, the grandfather, the godfather of the time machine that we know, died on August 13th, 1946, just after 2:30. And then that can be my reveal, right? 2:30 in the morning, very late at night, very haunting time of day, middle of the night. So that's my idea. Just give motivation to the plot with a story that has a direction and points to an exact time that is predicted, and try to get lucky by asking a couple of, what are seemingly benign questions. What's a really good time of day for you? And if I get a hit on that, I stop right there. And I say, well, that's a good time of day for me. A good time of day is this time. What's a really lousy time of day for you? And if I get a hit on that, then I can equate that and relate that and conflate that to my plot and the time that I'm forcing. So just a couple of options. And again, equivocate is always there if you want to come up with a way to force a time. Just quickly on equivocate, the idea with good equivocate is to always cut it in half until you get down to 1 or 3 that you can do a more traditional equivocate on. So on a clock face, you've got 12 possibilities. You want to cut them in half. You can do odds or evens. You can do the front half or the back half. One way to do it is say, imagine the clock face and imagine that you're going to take off of the clock face either the odd or the even numbers. Which ones do you want to take off? And they'd say the even numbers. And if that's what you're forcing is an even number, you say, good, let's take those off, and you have them in front of you now. So whatever they say, you're going to guide them into that. If they take off the evens and the odd are what you want to force, say, great, that you have the odd ones left on the clock. So let's think about these odd numbers, the 1, the 3, the 5, the 7, right? And then you can go from there and have them narrow that down. You can say maybe the early ones and the later ones. You have on the front side of the clock, you've got 1, 3, 5. On the back side, you've got 7, 9, and 11. Right? Which ones do you want to pick out of that? the front side or the back side. And if you want them to force into the front side, let's say the 3, they say the front, you say, great, we've picked those out, we're looking at the front. If you want the back, you say, great, we've picked those out, that leaves us with the back side. So this is equivoque. Always moving something from one location to another figuratively, cutting things in half until you get down to your force. Another possibility is to have them name their best and their worst times. And if, by chance, the time you want to force, the hour, is directly between, or one of the numbers nearly between, say, if we zero in between those two, we end up on this number, on this hour, which is very interesting. So we take your best and your worst, and we come up with this, which is a very interesting time for H.G. Wells, time of day, right? And again, nobody knows when H.G. Wells died, the time of day. I'm not sure you can even find that if you look it up. We're just making this up, okay? So those are a few ideas in terms of equivoque. If it's a little off-center, maybe you get lucky, but it's just a little off-center. You give them 2 numbers, and you say, so right between you have these 2 numbers. We've got the 5 and the 6. And let's say you're forcing 6. You say, you're looking at 5 and 6. Which one do you want to give to me, right? And they say 6. You say, great, you give me 6. 6 is the one we'll use, the hour of 6. And if they give you 6 and 5 is the one when you want to force, then you say, great, you're left with 5, right? This is just basic fundamental equivoque. So think this out if you want to get into that kind of a presentation. For me, I found that this is probably good enough. Have a good motivated story. Get lucky possibly by asking them a couple questions about hours. You can conflate, a daytime hour for a nighttime hour. If they say 2 o'clock in the afternoon is when they get off work or when they eat lunch or when they take a break, you can say 2 o'clock, but let's go to the very early morning, that midnight sort of time, 2 o'clock early in the morning, a very haunting hour. That's when H.G. Wells died. Whatever. You have control of the story. Make the numbers work for you, or just use the motivated story. That's my idea. So, and also, I'll put a link in there to my other timepiece tutorial. Everything that I mentioned about that tutorial will work with a watch like this, where you have a stem that can be pulled out and can be manipulated. So just with a regular watch, a minimalist watch, and the ability to manipulate it and use some of these kind of self-working principles, you might have some really, really good effects on your hands using a very inexpensive watch. Without having to track down one of those really expensive, really well worth the money watches, but hard to get, very expensive sort of timepieces. And for the amount of watch magic that you may do, this will probably satisfy you rather than going that other route. So good luck with this. And if you have any upgrade ideas to this, please put them in the comments so we can share with everybody else. And I wish you happy magicking.